The rain tapped a gentle rhythm against the kitchen window, a soft sound that did nothing to calm the storm inside me. I sat at my parents' familiar oak dining table, my hands clenched in my lap. I had rehearsed this speech all week, but now the words felt like ash in my mouth. "It's just a small loan," I finally managed, my voice trembling slightly. "Just to cover rent for a month or two. Until I find something new." The layoffs had been brutal and unexpected. My mother, Helen, let out a long, weary sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all my 35 years. "Lauren, we've done enough. We can't keep bailing you out." My father, Robert, stared intently at a crack in the tabletop, refusing to meet my eyes. Then Helen delivered the final blow. "Maybe if you stopped chasing these dead-end creative dreams, you wouldn't be in this position." The air left my lungs. I had helped them navigate their own debt a decade ago, sacrificing my own savings. Now, sitting in the house I'd grown up in, I felt like a stranger. A profound, silent realization settled over me. I was not welcome here anymore. Her words, dead-end dreams, echoed in my mind, each one a sharp sting. I barely remembered pulling on my coat and walking out their front door. A cold, persistent rain was now falling, soaking through my jacket. As I fumbled for my car keys, my mind flashed back to a lifetime of being the disappointment. I was the daughter who didn't marry a wealthy man, who didn't pursue a safe, predictable career at the bank like my perfect sister. My old, dependable sedan started with a sputter. As I reversed out of the driveway, I glanced back at the house one last time. Through the living room window, I saw my mother talking to my father, her hands moving in sharp, dismissive gestures. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. The message was clear. I clenched the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, the vinyl groaning in protest. A single, determined whisper escaped my lips, lost in the sound of the rain and the engine. "Just watch me," I said to the empty car. Rock bottom has a certain, unmistakable feel. It's the cold, rough texture of a friend's sofa bed, the hollow pit in your stomach when the eviction notice arrives, and the bitter taste of swallowed pride. A week after that dreadful dinner, I was officially homeless, my meager savings completely drained. My friend Maya let me crash in her living room, and I tried to be as small and quiet as possible, a ghost in my own life. One evening, while unpacking a box of my old books, a faded, yellowed note fell from between the pages of my old college literature textbook. My grandmother's elegant, looping handwriting was unmistakable. My heart ached, I missed her every day. The note read, "Never forget what they owe you, but don't repay it with anger. Repay it with proof." I read it once, then again, my breath catching. It felt like a message sent across time. The tight knot of hurt and rage in my chest began to slowly, subtly, unravel into something else, resolve. The interview at Morris & Associates was my last scheduled hope. The small architecture firm was housed in a renovated brick building, a world away from the sterile corporate high-rises I was used to. The owner, Evan Morris, a man in his late 40s with kind eyes and a firm handshake, scanned my portfolio. He didn't seem impressed by my big company past. "The work here is hard," he said, his gaze steady and serious. "It's hands-on. There are no shortcuts, no fancy titles to hide behind. We build things from the ground up." I met his gaze, my back straight. "I understand. I'm not looking for shortcuts." He must have seen the raw determination in my eyes, the flicker of someone with nothing left to lose. He hired me on the spot for a junior position. The pay was a fraction of my old salary, but it was a lifeline. It was stability. It felt like my first full breath of air after nearly drowning. A month into the new job, I felt a small flicker of confidence. I decided to extend an olive branch to my parents. I sent a simple, polite text, "Just wanted to let you know I got a new job. I'm doing okay." I waited, my phone feeling heavy in my hand. The reply from my mother came an hour later. "That's wonderful news, Lauren. We're proud of you. Maybe now you'll finally understand what real life and real responsibility are all about." Asterisk I read the message 3 times. There was no warmth, no "I'm sorry for how we spoke," no "we're here for you." Just condescending approval, as if I were a child who had finally tidied her room. A cold, clear understanding washed over me. The quiet, desperate hope I had been clinging to, that they would see my effort and apologize, finally evaporated. I deleted the message. In its place, a new, quiet vow was born deep within me. I would prove them wrong, so completely and utterly, that they would never be able to look at me with pity again. I buried myself in work. I arrived first at the office and left last, the dim glow of my computer screen my only companion in the evenings. I taught myself new, complex design software, staying up late with online tutorials until my eyes burned. When the chance to lead a small client presentation came up, I volunteered immediately. I prepared for it like it was the most important moment of my life. And we won the project. A tiny flame of pride ignited in my chest. That evening, buoyed by this small victory, I called my parents. My mother answered after a few rings. "Hi, Mom. I just led a presentation today and we landed a new client," I said, a hint of a smile in my voice. There was a brief pause. "That's great, honey," she said, her tone dismissive. "But your sister, Jessica, just got promoted to vice president at the bank. Can you believe it? Isn't that just something?" The smile froze on my face. "Yeah, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "That's really something." I ended the call and looked at my reflection in the dark window. My smile was bitter, but my eyes were steady. A few months later, I met my sister, Jessica, for a quick brunch. She was always busy, but she made time, which I appreciated. We were chatting about her work when she casually mentioned, "It's been so stressful at home. Mom and Dad are freaking out about money again. The property taxes have skyrocketed, and I overheard Mom on the phone with the bank. They're worried about defaulting on the mortgage." The world seemed to slow down. The mortgage? I took a slow sip of my coffee, trying to keep my expression neutral. "I had no idea," I said softly. Jessica shrugged. "They don't like to talk about it. You know how they are." But I did know. I knew that when they had told me they couldn't afford to help me, it had been a choice. They had the means, they just hadn't chosen me. The sting of that betrayal was sharper and colder than any eviction notice. But instead of crumbling, I felt a strange, icy calm. The pieces of a plan began to click into place in my mind. The firm was looking for new, innovative projects to pitch. I saw my chance. I spent nights and weekends developing a proposal for the Willow Initiative, a concept for affordable, eco-friendly housing that used sustainable materials and smart design. It was ambitious, personal, and a little risky. I presented the preliminary idea to Evan in his office. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "This is bold, Lauren. It could put us on the map," he said, his expression unreadable. "But if this fails, if we can't secure funding, the fallout will land squarely on you. It could be the end of your career here." I didn't flinch. I looked him directly in the eye, the memory of my grandmother's note echoing in my mind. "Then I'll make sure it's unbreakable," I replied, my voice firm and clear. He gave a slow, approving nod. The initial excitement around the Willow Initiative quickly met the hard wall of reality. A key investor got cold feet and pulled out. The project stalled, and doubt began to creep in at the office. I heard the whispers. Then, a family friend, Mrs. Gable, pulled me aside after church one Sunday. "I ran into your mother at the grocery store, dear," she said, patting my arm. "She was talking about you. She said, Lauren's always been such a dreamer, never practical. She's chasing another one of her fantasies." She said it right there in the checkout line. A hot flush of humiliation crept up my neck. Mrs. Gable looked at me with pity. But instead of the tears that usually threatened in such moments, I felt a strange, cold stillness. I simply smiled at Mrs. Gable. "Thank you for telling me," I said. I walked to my car, got inside, and sat in the silence for a long moment. Then, I whispered to myself, good. Let them underestimate me. I was working late, again, the blueprints for the Willow Initiative spread across my desk. Evan walked by, saw the light in my office, and came in. He poured 2 cups of coffee from the carafe he was carrying and handed one to me. You remind me of myself when I started, he said, leaning against the doorframe. My family told me I was wasting my time, that a small firm would never succeed. They wanted me to be a lawyer. He took a sip of his coffee. Success isn't loud, Lauren. It doesn't happen overnight. It's quiet. It's consistent. It's showing up every single day, especially when no one is cheering for you. His words were a balm to my weary spirit. I started saving every spare penny, cutting all non-essential expenses. I lived on coffee, determination, and the slow, growing traction the Willow Initiative was getting online from a few influential design blogs that loved its sustainable vision. My phone buzzed one evening, my mother's name flashing on the screen. I hadn't heard from her in months. I took a deep breath and answered. Lauren, honey, she began, her voice strained with a false brightness. I was just wondering if you knew anything about property tax appeals? A friend of mine is asking, and I thought, with your new job. It was a flimsy disguise for her panic. I could hear the real fear underneath. The bank's threats must have become very real. I listened calmly, not interrupting. When she finally finished her rambling question, there was a long pause. I could feel her waiting, expecting me to jump in, to offer help, to fix it as I always had. I took a slow, quiet breath. I'm sure you and Dad will figure something out, Mom, I said, my voice even and polite. You always do. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. I ended the call and for the first time, I didn't feel a shred of guilt for not rushing to their rescue. Evan called me into his office. A well-dressed couple was sitting there, smiling. Lauren, this is Mr. and Mrs. Vance, he said. They're investors who specialize in green projects. They found the Willow Initiative online and flew in to meet you. My heart hammered against my ribs. I walked them through my plans, my passion for the project breaking through my nervousness. They asked sharp, intelligent questions, and I had all the answers. A week later, Evan shook my hand, a huge grin on his face. They're in. Full funding. And effective immediately, you're being promoted to lead architect. The Willow Initiative was no longer just a proposal, it was a reality. My income jumped significantly, with a generous bonus from the investor deal. I opened a new, separate bank account and began funneling money into it. I told no one in my family. I just kept working, my goal now clearly in sight. To my complete shock, an invitation to a family dinner arrived via text from my mother. It had been over 2 years since I'd last sat at that table. Curiosity won over pride. I went. The dinner was a surreal replay of my entire life. My mother spent the evening lavishing praise on Jessica's latest achievement at the bank. She's just so strong, so capable, Helen said, beaming at my sister. I was largely ignored, a piece of the furniture. Then, as dessert was being served, my mother let out a heavy, dramatic sigh. I don't know how we're going to manage it, she said, her voice cracking slightly. The bank, we might have to sell the house soon. We just can't keep up. My fork, halfway to my mouth, froze. The house. The one with the oak table where I'd been refused. The one with my childhood room. A hot surge of anger rushed through me, but it was quickly followed by a wave of absolute, crystalline clarity. This was it. This was the moment my secret plan would come to life. The next morning, I made a discreet call to the bank that held my parents' mortgage. I identified myself as a financial advisor doing due diligence for a client, a small white lie that granted me the information I needed. The banker confirmed the full, outstanding balance. It was a staggering sum, but not impossible. Not for me, not anymore. I spent the rest of the day reviewing my finances. Every bonus, every saved dollar, every bit of my side income was in that account. It was everything I had. I logged into my banking portal, my hands perfectly steady. I set up a new trust, naming it W Initiative Holdings, a direct, private nod to my project. Then, I typed in the bank's routing number and my parents' loan number. I entered the full, exact amount of the mortgage balance. I took a deep, final breath and clicked transfer. The screen refreshed. A confirmation number appeared. It was done. A week later, my phone started buzzing incessantly. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. And again. Finally, a text from my father came through, *, please call your mother. She's very upset. *, I knew what had happened. They had received the letter from the bank. I imagined the scene, my mother opening the official-looking envelope, her eyes scanning the words settled in full. She would have panicked, assuming it was a mistake or, worse, a sophisticated scam. Robert would have been baffled, rubbing his forehead in confusion. They would have called the bank immediately, their voices trembling. And the patient bank representative would have confirmed it, a private investor, ma'am. W Initiative Holdings. They cleared the entire debt. You owe nothing more. I could picture my mother's hand flying to her chest, her legs going weak. I could almost hear her bewildered, breathless question to my father, but who? Who in the world would do such a thing for us? I decided to pay them a visit, a small box of expensive pastries in my hand. I needed to see it for myself. My mother opened the door, and her demeanor was completely different. She was softer, almost giddy. She pulled me inside, her words tumbling out in an excited rush. Lauren, you'll never believe it. A miracle. A true miracle. Someone, a secret donor, paid off our entire mortgage. The house is ours, free and clear. She was watching my face, perhaps looking for shared shock. I simply nodded, placing the pastries on the now less intimidating oak table. That's wonderful news, Mom, I said, my voice calm and even. You must feel incredibly lucky. I kept my expression neutral, a gentle smile playing on my lips. But inside, I was soaring. The power in the room, the power that had always belonged to them, had silently, irrevocably, shifted. It now belonged to me. My big moment was approaching. The Willow Initiative had been shortlisted for a prestigious regional design award, and the gala was a black tie affair. I mailed 2 tickets to my parents with a simple, handwritten note, *, thought you might like to come. My project is a finalist. Lauren. *, I knew they would come. Their curiosity would be too much to resist. The night of the gala, I saw them from across the grand ballroom. They were dressed in their best clothes, but they looked out of place amidst the sleek, confident crowd. They stood near the back, their eyes wide as they took in the room. They were completely unaware of what was about to happen. They had no idea that the project being honored was not just something I worked on, but was my brainchild, my creation from the ground up. I smoothed down my elegant, dark blue gown and waited. The host took the stage and began describing the winning project. A visionary approach to sustainable community living, blending eco-conscious design with stunning aesthetics. My parents were listening politely, clapping along with the crowd. Then the host's voice rose. And the lead architect and project director for the Willow Initiative is Lauren Pierce. The room erupted in applause. A spotlight swept over the audience and landed on me. I stood up gracefully. As I walked toward the stage, I allowed my gaze to find my parents' table. My father's mouth was hanging open. My mother was frozen solid, her jaw slack with pure, unadulterated shock. Her eyes were wide, frantically moving from me, to the stage, back to me. I walked up the steps, my posture steady, my smile soft but undeniably victorious. I didn't need to look at them again. The image of their disbelief was already burned into my memory forever. After the ceremony, amid the buzzing crowd and well-wishers, my mother found me in the nearly empty parking lot. She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Her face was a messy canvas of confusion, shame, and dawning realization. She stammered, her voice trembling. You could have told us. You could have said something. Why the secret, Lauren? To humiliate us? I looked at her, at the woman who had always made me feel small. The anger I had carried for so long was gone, replaced by a vast, quiet pity. You could have believed in me, I replied, my voice calm and clear in the cool night air. Just once. My father stood a few feet behind her, staring at the ground, completely silent. He had nothing to say. He had never had anything to say. I gently pulled my arm from her grasp, got into my car, and drove away before the emotional whirlwind could catch up to me. I knew words were needed, but a shouting match wasn't my style. A few days after the gala, I sat down and wrote a letter. I chose my words with care, writing in my best penmanship on heavy, cream-colored paper. It was not a letter of gloating or venom. It was a statement of fact. Dear Mom and Dad, I wrote. The house is paid for. You don't owe me anything, not a single penny, and not a single explanation. I did not do it for gratitude. I just wanted to give back to you what you once refused to give me, help, without conditions, when I needed it the most. Lauren. I dropped it in the mailbox and pictured my mother opening it, her hands shaking. I imagined her reading the short, simple sentences over and over. And for the first time in my adult life, I believed she might finally, truly understand. I heard through Jessica that after reading it, my mother had sat at the kitchen table for a very long time, and she had cried. The news spread through our small town like wildfire. The neighbors talked. Their friends from church whispered. Did you hear about Helen and Robert? Their daughter, the one they always said was a dreamer, she paid off their house. And she's that famous architect. The embarrassment my parents felt was not from public exposure, but from the private, crushing weight of their own misjudgment. They saw, reflected in the surprised and admiring eyes of their peers, how profoundly wrong they had been about me. I stayed distant, politely busy with the explosive growth of my company. Phone calls went unanswered, invitations to Sunday lunch were declined with a polite, I'm swamped with work. The balance of power had not just shifted, it had been permanently reversed. I was now the stable one, the successful one, the one in control. Nearly 2 months after the gala, I was in my office reviewing site plans when my assistant buzzed me. Your mother is here to see you, Lauren. I was stunned. I told her to send her in. Helen Pierce walked into my modern, corner office, her eyes taking in the awards on the wall, the panoramic city view. She looked small and old. She fumbled with her purse strap. I thought I was helping you, she began, her voice fragile. I thought if we were tough on you, it would force you to toughen up, to be more practical. I see now. I see how wrong I was. I listened quietly, letting her speak her piece. When she finished, I nodded slowly. You did, Mom, I said, my voice gentle but firm. You did make me tough. There was a long, heavy silence. She waited, perhaps for an invitation to lunch, for a hug, for an absolution. I offered none. This was closure, not a new beginning. She finally nodded, turned, and walked out. Months drifted by. Life was quiet. Then, I received a frantic string of texts from Jessica. Mom was going through her old mortgage paperwork and found the name of the trust that paid it off. W. Initiative Holdings. She looked it up in the business registry. Lauren, she knows it's you. She knows you were the mystery donor. I felt a strange sense of completion. The final piece of the puzzle had clicked into place for her. My mother called me immediately. I watched my phone screen light up with her name, vibrate, and then go dark. She called again. And again. I didn't answer. She had all the proof she would ever need. The realization that her dreamer daughter was not only successful but had been her secret savior, the knowledge that she had been charity to the person she'd looked down on, that was a truth she needed to sit with alone. Her pride, I knew, had finally and completely shattered. One evening, driven by a force I didn't quite understand, I found myself driving past my childhood home. I parked a little way down the street and turned off the engine. The house looked warm and peaceful in the twilight. Through the large living room window, I could see my parents. They were sitting in their respective armchairs, not talking, not watching television. They were just sitting, still and quiet. Humbled. The frantic energy my mother always carried was gone. The silent disapproval from my father seemed to have softened into something resembling regret. I watched them for a long time, two people in the house I had bought for them, living with the consequence of their actions. A sad, small smile touched my lips. "Now you know," I whispered to the quiet night inside my car. I started the engine, pulled away from the curb, and drove toward my future without looking back. Months later, a thick, legal-sized envelope arrived from my mother. There was no letter, just a short note paper-clipped to the top of the documents. The note, in her familiar handwriting, said, "You built this family with your heart when we failed to. It should have always been yours." Paper clipped below it was the deed to the house, officially signed over to me. Lauren Pierce. Sole owner. I held the papers for a long moment, feeling the weight of the journey they represented. Then, I placed the deed and the note into a drawer in my desk and closed it. I walked out of my office and onto the construction site of my new project, a hard hat perched on my head. The sign at the entrance read, Future Home of Pierce Foundations, Transitional Housing for Women. My legacy was no longer tied to a house filled with painful memories. It was beginning here, on this dusty, hopeful ground, built from my own two hands, right where my pain had once lived. It was a quiet, earned, and complete triumph.